So, this is one of my favorite things to do, which is chat with our customers in front of lots of other customers and potential customers. So my name's Dave Russell. I'm Director of Voice of Customer at Grafana Labs. So amongst many other things, that means if you've ever filed a feature request, it's come through one of my teams, we help the product and engineering teams understand the feedback and all that kind of good stuff. So with that, we're going to kind of go through a couple of questions that we've already got prepared. But as you can see, there's a QR code up here. So if you'd like to ask Neil and Jeremy any questions as we start to go through this, preferably around AI and observability, then please hit the QR code and put those questions into Slido. But without further ado, Neil and Jeremy, tell us a little bit about you. So we'll start here. Yeah. So a little bit about you, your role at the organization, and what your organization does.
My name is Neil Laughlin. I grew up in the technical operations discipline at a little company based in the Pacific Northwest called Microsoft. It was interesting to see them figure out how to run internet services. Very quickly, it became clear to me with my science background that monitoring was amazing. It gave you insight into what your customers are actually experiencing. And with a first product that was shipping set-top boxes out to sit on top of people's televisions, understanding whether those set-top boxes were actually able to reach our services, ensure that they always were, ensure they were updated, and then recover them when they went offline. It's just an amazing challenge to work through in the late 90s from a technical perspective. Since then, I have moved through a number of companies, some large, some more mid-sized. Currently, I lead the infrastructure engineering, resilience, release, quality engineering function at AuditBoard. I'm not allowed to call it platform engineering. That's somebody else's job. But AuditBoard helps companies put their audits and governance, risk, and compliance capabilities onto boards so that they can be used for audit and other processes.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. Jeremy, how about you?
So my name is Jeremy White. I'm a VP of Engineering at SpotOn. I kind of started as a developer and then really got into the operations area pretty soon. Started to get into networking, started to get into databases, started to do DevOps, security. My problem was I found everything fascinating, and so I started to get into everything. I think that's one of the strengths, I think, when you get into platform engineering is kind of having that bigger picture and seeing how software works at scale and how it interacts in all these different pieces. And so I started observability very early on, building some of my own early on, just trying to understand how things operated as things hit scale, because that was the area that I enjoyed most. So specifically at SpotOn, I oversee our core services and our infrastructure teams. Our infrastructure teams, these are basically our platform engineering, so more on the code side, behind the scenes of what we do to try to help our other engineering teams, as well as on the infrastructure side. We've got a pretty complex environment in terms of we've got dozens of SaaS products, many different tech stacks, many different even just areas of where those products work. But then we also have hundreds of thousands of Android devices out in the field that we have to monitor, and networking devices. So trying to pull all those together and tell a more holistic story about how the whole platform is working is something that's been pretty fascinating and something that I think observability makes kind of fun to be able to see.
Nice, nice. Okay, so maybe continuing with you then, to give maybe the audience some context, what does your sort of observability platform look like?
So it was a little bit more segmented a little over a year ago. So we purchased Grafana Labs about last June, and then got that implemented by the end of the year. So that was a pretty big effort for us. I'm a big believer that if you're going to do something, just do it. We've had way too many projects that last 2 and 3 years long that just, when they drag out like that, it just saps everybody. So we had really good success rolling that out. So now we've consolidated into one, but our bigger challenge was trying to collect information from so many different devices. OpenTelemetry helped with a lot of the cloud stuff in particular. We did have to kind of do some of our own on the Android side in order to get some of the metrics and the hardware data. Because again, our hardware, when it runs in the kitchens, it's not a hospitable environment for that hardware. So we see a lot of problems for a lot of different reasons. And so we collect a lot of that hardware metrics to understand where our failure rates are, what hardware we should be using, what ones don't work so well, when to waterproof things, a lot of things there. We also found that a lot of our networking devices didn't have the native being able to pull those metrics out. So we had to write some custom stuff there, pull that out, get it into Grafana. So our big thing has really been about trying to pull all the data from all these different actual applications and sources, as opposed to different observability technologies. We've been able to consolidate on the observability technology, which has been pretty good for us.
Nice, nice. Okay. So Neil, how about you? What does your observability platform look like at AuditBoard?
AuditBoard moved to Grafana Cloud last year. Previously, we were using a very hungry dog as our provider for the core observability capabilities. And right now, we're generally taking advantage of it for metrics, traces, profiles. What I've really seen the power of over the last few months, and particularly through this conference, is how bringing everything together and tying it to what we're calling artificial intelligence unlocks so much additional power. So we're in the process of bringing over logs right now, and just in generally tying together the insights we get from these different signals to be able to produce better insights than we could when we were using separate, albeit best in area tools historically.
Yeah. Okay, nice. So maybe, Neil, we'll continue with you. When you're looking at the challenges that you're trying to solve in the observability space, how does that change under the lens or with the lens of AI?
One of the challenges that we have is adoption outside the centralized observability experts, largely within my organization. The previous product was a pretty good product and had some people that had figured out how to use it within the development organizations to solve the problems. So there was, Jeremy and I were talking about this, there was panic around switching and having to learn a new tool. What I've seen with the AI assistant, even just this week, is that it's very straightforward to use it to bridge the gap of remembering the syntax, remembering how to interact with the Grafana specific tooling. It solves so many problems, shows you what it does, and then gives you the ability to look at its solution and say, okay, I see what is happening here. Next time, I can get to this more quickly, or I can work with the AI agent to make sure that the implementation is done quickly, and I'm not spending all my time doing research on how to put the query together.
Yeah. Adoption. I mean, any kind of change is always scary for people,
Yes.
and change management, while it's such a dull-sounding topic, is so critical to things like migrations and stuff like that as well. Yeah, makes sense. So yeah, Jeremy, what about you? Like the challenges that you're facing under the lens of AI, how does that shift or change things?
It's funny, because like Neil and I have been talking about it, because it's the same, it's adoption, and it's adoption for me even outside of engineering. I think one of the challenges is that observability right now is seen kind of as an engineering tool in just identifying problems. And that makes it a hard tool to sell if that's all it's doing. So really trying to find ways for other teams to start leveraging that, because there's a lot of good information in there. I like to think that we're data rich, story poor, where I think we have so much telemetry and so much data to tell really good stories, but it's just overwhelming when you're just trying to look through the data. So trying to get subject matter experts to more easily sift through that data for what's relevant for them, whether that be in product, whether that be in support, whether that be in any other area. I think that's where we're trying to get to, where observability tells a larger story of how our product is working, as opposed to just looking for when there's problems and sending alerts to be on call.
Okay, that makes sense. So maybe kind of continuing on that kind of adoption vein a little bit, and with you, Jeremy, like what are the things that are preventing you from adopting some of the AI solutions that are out there, or even things that you might be looking to build yourself faster?
So AI is a tricky one because well, for one, it's moving so fast, it's hard to tell what to do. I mean, 6 months ago it was different than a year ago, and it was different than even more than that.
Yeah.
I also feel like kind of the hype has added a little too much resistance. You see some people that go all in and are willing to get into the AI and use that, and then others that, it's, the hype's too big, it won't work. So really, I know there's a lot of focus of wanting to use AI, and it's a great tool. I think just using it as a tool and just treating it as a tool instead of calling it AI is one of the biggest things that we're really trying to push. This is just, it's kind of like, back in the day, I remember people getting upset when people would Google how to do code and things like that. And it became this big thing, like, oh, you can't just copy pasta your code. And now, like, people are doing that regularly. You're almost, so I think change is hard for most of us as humans, and I think that transition with something that's moving so fast and that's been sold as being so impactful is just hard for a lot of people to cope with. So honestly, I think it's finding where it's practically usable is where I think the sweet spot is. I think all the overhype of what it could do, it does it a disservice. I think if we can focus more on here's the practical use cases and where it can help, that's where we've seen a little bit more success with.
Yeah, makes sense. Neil, how about you? Like, what would help speed things up for AI adoption for you?
There's an impedance mismatch we're seeing right now where the new tools are emerging so quickly that the engineers working in my team on AI adoption and AI enablement for the other parts of the development organizations are looking at what exists today and saying, I think this is good. We'll probably want to switch to something new in 3 months' time when something new and disruptive appears. And then when we try to take it through the procurement process and are having the conversations with financial planning and legal, they're saying, okay, so these are the only tools you're going to be using for FY26, right? And we're saying, no, we can't promise that. So the process of educating the finance and the legal partners on how this ecosystem we're in right now works has been critical to our success. And I wouldn't say we've solved all of the problems here, but creating that dialogue between our partners on the business side and the engineers that are working on adoption has been valuable for speeding it up and creating essentially a plan to be able to explore something that may not exist today, but we might want to bring in 3, 4, 5 months from now.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see being beneficial to have some sort of top-down sort of mandate saying like, hey, we want to explore as much of this world as we can because we know that if we don't, the chances are we run the risk of falling behind. Yeah. But with that comes the challenges of figuring out how do you financially plan for any of that.
And what I'll say is that right now we do have a mandate from above to adopt AI tools. There is the belief, often from non-technical sources, that we just got to go do this and the magic will occur from there. I'm actually curious how many organizations represented here face that same sort of go use AI challenge, go be more productive by drawing on these tools.
Yeah, I mean, show of hands, like who's in that state right now? Yeah.
And we're in it too, right? And I think the challenge is even if you look at how AI is used, before it was more you're just having conversations, constant conversations. Now you're seeing more spec-driven development. Like the biggest challenge is I don't think the patterns have truly evolved yet, and it's moving so fast that that's what makes it hard. So we're still, I think, in that experimentation phase to figure out exactly how best to use AI in different areas, because there are areas it does phenomenal at. There's other areas that its non-deterministic nature makes it a little less, great. Yeah. So I think the important part is really understanding this, because I do believe that AI is going to change the way much of us do our work moving forward. But how is unclear. So I think the more we get familiar with where it works well, where it doesn't, it's a tool like any other tool. And I think the better we get at equipping that tool, the better we'll be set up for success as we move forward.
Yeah. I think this is kind of a nice segue onto, because there is so much hype and it is unavoidable. And obviously, senior execs are hearing the hype all the time. and are wondering, like, why isn't this already here? Like, why haven't we done all of the things in AI? How do you help kind of navigate those kind of conversations and kind of maybe temper some of the enthusiasm and excitement that folks have with maybe a dose of reality? Maybe Jeremy will continue.
Yeah, it comes down to like everything. You kind of have to test it. I mean, they're not wrong in that this is a very powerful tool that can accelerate what we do. I think where they did go wrong was going too far too fast about what the potential is versus what the reality is. And so what I found helpful is, directionally, it's right. We should be learning more to adopt it and figuring out how to leverage this tool set into our normal day-to-day. But I think as you start to work out examples of where it worked, where it didn't work, did it not work because of the tooling, or did it not work because of our process for using the tooling, right? A lot of it is, this is, again, an age of experimentation, and I think the moment people start to figure out what that workflow looks like with AI as a part of it, instead of I'm not a big fan of the AI is going to replace the workflows. That part gets, I think, a little too far down the road, maybe someday, but right now, leveraging it inside of the workflows and figuring out how you become more efficient and that 10x multiplier kind of thing, I think that's, once we hit that spot and find out where it works and where it doesn't, and just showing it does work here, it doesn't work here, but we gave it a real try. Because I think the reason you're starting to see a lot of the demand for doing it is because there is a lot of resistance to the hype being too big, which is right, but it shouldn't mean don't even look at it.
Yeah.
Because it really has progressed impressively these last few years. Like, it's genuinely impressive how far AI has come along. Just because the hype is so big doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it at all, though.
Yeah, makes sense. Neil, how about you? How are you helping to give a healthy dose of reality to some folks in the story?
Yeah, well, as I alluded to, we are receiving top-down direction to explore and hit quantitative goals around being more productive. But anybody who has worked in an engineering function for any amount of time knows that at a strategic level, measuring engineering productivity is really difficult and is often an outcome of events outside an engineering team's control. Also, I've never worked on a job that has been good and interesting where I have had as many people to solve problems as I wish. And that's very much the case in AuditBoard today. I'm sure it's very much the case for people here working on instrumenting the systems that they manage, build, own, using observability tools. So for me, if we can leverage AI in the observability space, get to some of that work that we've always wanted to do with correlation, or the investigation capabilities that were demoed this week were fantastic to see. I'm really excited about the fact that this will make it easier to do some of the projects we've always wanted to do. And I've encouraged my team, go try the tools. Let us know, let me know if they're working, if they're solving the problems or not. We don't want to try to use every possible tool in an industry where more are showing up literally every day.
Yeah.
But let's find a few that solve problems that are important to us. And then when the are you more productive because you're using AI conversation is directed at us, say, yes, here's what we did.
Yeah.
Here's the problems that the AI tooling we are choosing to focus our time in solved for us. And we're happy about it.
Being happy about things is very important,
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a nice kind of segue again onto, we've been talking a lot about like the exec perspective and top down and things like that. But of course, like there is a lot of FUD and there is a lot of scaremongering and that side of things around, like how do you encourage adoption when there's so much scaremongering around AI is going to take our jobs and that side of things?
Yeah. I wish I had a perfect answer to that. Within my own organization, understanding that the incentives for my group and for the success of the customers ties to doing the work we always wanted to do. that the AI tools will let us do the work we always wanted to do faster. Will let us engage on some of the code migrations where we're eliminating technical debt. Will let us retire some old code that we would like to delete out of the code base. That has a lot of appeal. And where we can get past the, but will we really hit the % productivity number, to, no, go try it. I'm going to support the members of the organization in trying it out. I'm going to be right there with them, learning the tools alongside them. Some will be good. Some of them will fail to meet our expectations. But we will chart a path together. We will be able to demonstrate how we met our goals using AI, not just use AI as the goal.
Yeah. Jeremy, how about you? How are you kind of helping to counter some of the some of this that's coming in the news?
A lot of it is, I think, socializing where it's worked and where it hasn't. It was interesting seeing how many people at first, like their eyes really opened up when they saw someone else actually go through and actually do it end to end. Because it's kind of scary, right? You're getting into a whole new field that most of us are just unfamiliar. There's no experts. There's very few at least, right? And so it is kind of daunting to go in and be told, all right, now you're expected to deliver 10x because we gave you this tool on day one. And I think that's unrealistic, right? And so I think right now, somewhere along the way, I think many of us kind of forgot that we have to relearn technology. Like I've been in this business for a little while. And so this is like the 3rd or 4th generation where just everything just upended and you had to. So I think a lot of people are new to that, where everything you used to and got comfortable with is going away. It's not away yet, but you see that. And what's weird about this one is usually you get a couple of years where this is kind of, it's a slow moving thing. This is moving so fast that it's a little scarier. So I think the more you start to see collaboration where people are working together and then helping one another out, because again, we're learning new patterns. You can't even go and see what the best practices are for using AI right now. And even if you did, tomorrow they'd be different. So I found that we've started different sessions where we've got one person that's running prompt club, and they'll go through and they literally they'll come up with a thing, and the whole group will just collectively try and go through prompts and try to solve the problem with it. And it's really trying to get familiar with the tooling, again, to figure out kind of where it works and where it doesn't. So I think the more you start to see it, the more you start to see the examples, you get a better feel for how and where to apply this tool.
I really like that. Unlike, I don't know, cloud or Kubernetes, where we had to go choose to invest in that area. AI is coming to us and saying, and we're being told,
they're coming to us
now.
And then they don't even have the here's how you do it. It's just it's coming. Be prepared. So it is. It's an awkward situation. I can't remember in our industry when we last ran into that, because usually it takes a while for these things to really ramp up and get enough popularity where you've got some time to kind of get some patterns established and figure out, okay, we could do this or we could do that. It doesn't exist right now.
I think it's consumer web. That was the time everything was so disrupted as it is now.
No, that absolutely makes sense. And it is very much whether you think about cloud or Kubernetes or virtualization, like you can go back any number of kind of revolutions, evolutions that we've been through in the tech industry. This is one that feels very different for the speed and for the rate of innovation. Has definitely kind of ramped up here, I think. That makes sense. All right, so we've got a few other questions, but we've got some good questions coming in from the audience. So maybe Jeremy, we'll continue with you. How do you see AI, in particular agentic LLMs, being economically viable in the longer term? How will this be sustainable when it comes to large amounts of context and tokens being necessary?
I think that's going to be the next big challenge. I think most engineers are going to become really, how do you manage context? And if you think about it, we used to do this. When I started, I did the requirements gathering, I did the testing, I did the design, I did the infrastructure, I think in the beginning it was a lot of generalists, and then you had a lot of, we kind of worked our way into specialists into different areas, whether it was front end, mobile, back end, databases. I think this will help sustain, because now we can take a step back and be looking at the bigger picture and relying on specialists that honestly, I guarantee you that an LLM will recall things far better than I can, right? I may be able to deduce patterns and I may be able to kind of see bigger picture, but when it comes to just recall and kind of some of the creative things that it's able to do, it's hard to compete with. So I do see it being sustainable, but again, it's a tool like any other. Where I think people go wrong is when they look at AI as a person. Again, I don't like it will replace a person, because I don't believe that. At least not for some time, maybe someday. But at this point, it's more as a tool like any other. If you look across programming languages, we've consistently created higher level abstractions of programming languages that we've programmed in. And I think the next one is going to be context. I think context is going to be, and specifications are going to be the new programming language farther on down the road, right? Because really that's what we're being handed, and we're translating that and putting that into solutions. At the end of the day, us as engineers, we're here to solve problems. Sometimes we get excited about the code we write and things like that, but at the end of the day, it's the solutions that ultimately matter. And so I think this tool is just going to be one that's going to become a major part of how we deliver those solutions.
Yeah. So maybe, Neil, asking you a different question. Do you ever consider the environmental impact when planning for or implementing AI at scale?
Yes, and it's an interesting situation to be in right now to gather information around the impact of using these new capabilities, the new data centers. Having had a seat at Microsoft a decade or so ago, I know that that's one of the areas where the large companies that are still running bare metal data centers are investing in. But as now a consumer of those services, the flow of information, it's harder to find, harder to understand the impact of the services that are being used. I also, I mean, this is jumping a bit back to the question that you asked, Jeremy, but I also think that the model that we're in right now is it's the trial model for pricing these capabilities. We don't know what the end-to-end cost of using these products built on token consumption down to the AI data center is today. My team is planning for 12 to 18 months or so out, a complete shift in how these capabilities are priced in evaluating what we want to buy into and become dependent upon now. Again, it's a hard sell to the finance and legal teams. Expect that everything we're doing now, you'll have to throw out and forget in 15 months' time. But I do think this is the experimental phase, and we're going to learn what the actual economics are of these token-based products in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah. It also feels like we're going to be in that experimental phase for a little while now, because it's going to carry on changing as well. So it's not even as if like, oh, excuse me, but we'll figure this out in the next 10 or 15 months or whatever, and then we'll have everything sorted. Like there's probably going to be quite a bit of continuous evaluation of this for a little while until, if even it kind of settles in some way.
I think once it settles to a certain point, you'll start to see a shift more towards efficiency, whether that's the cost and pricing, whether that's just I think right now when you're in an experimentation phase, you're right or wrong, you're less interested in efficiency, you're more interested in how do I get to the solution faster. And I think that's the phase we're in now.
Which is any migration. First, make it work. Make sure that you can make the leap from what you were doing to what you want to be doing going forward.
Exactly.
And then invest in making sure that the model is sustainable over time in all the terms.
I think something else I think you mentioned as well is like it's quite difficult to get like really good information on this. Like there are some really good research papers out there. If you go like really digging and you like really dive deep into those kind of ecosystems to like find the research material that is out there. But A, it's changing so quickly, and B, like it's research material. There's a lot of digging in you need to do to like extract something a little bit more meaningful to what it is that you're trying to do.
I go back to my first experience with Usenet, where there was a warning: when you post to Usenet your story or message, I don't even remember what they're called anymore, your post will be distributed to thousands of computers, and this will cost money. And are you really sure you want to talk about your latest book review or the like? Well, those barriers obviously didn't last.
Yeah.
But it is a good reminder that there is a cost to this infrastructure that we're leveraging.
Definitely, definitely. All right. So next question is, and we'll go to you for this one, Jeremy. What's been the biggest barrier to entry for internal users adopting AI into their triaging process? So maybe triaging or code review, that side of things?
So there hasn't been a lot yet. It's more about figuring out when and where to use it. I actually think in triage is one of the most valuable places and one of the easiest to sell for AI right now. Because especially when you start getting a lot of logs and metrics, a lot of data, when you can point them to rags where you've got, here's all our support documentation and things like that. I think that's arguably one of the easier positions to take from an AI perspective. The trick is how to make it easy for everyone to do, because right now, again, if you don't have that productized, and this is one of the reasons I was excited about Assistant, because it really does make that a lot easier. We end up with a lot, it's always hard pulling engineers out of the proactive work they're doing to do the reactive work. And so the more you can really kind of trim that down, like the number of times I've seen a ticket wait for days because no one looked at it, and then it only took an hour not only to discover what was wrong, right, but also fix it. Or it takes 10 hours to figure out what's wrong, and it's the one line of code that all it did to fix it. Those are the kind of things I think that LLMs and AI in general will be able to help direct you faster and better. So I don't see a lot of resistance there, other than we don't have good processes baked in yet for, hey, here's what you do. Which again is why we were kind of excited about Assistant, because now you're already in this tool. If you've already got an alert, you can already get this information. I think that kind of lowers that barrier of entry, making it easier for people to use.
Yeah, makes sense. Neil, anything you'd add there?
I honestly think the biggest barrier right now in how we typically triage, two barriers actually. One, we don't have all the data in the same place. So the human has to do the integration across the different signals. And two, we need to go to the engineers who are very busy and say, okay, if you take the 5 minutes to practice pushing the little sparkle button when you're in Grafana and then tell it what you want it to do for you, you're going to like the results. Here, let me show you. You try it. You got it. Okay, good. Yeah. And then if we just can get that bit of time with the users of the observability product to show them how it can help them, they will realize that there's a lot in it for them to adopt it. And this isn't even specific to AI. This is just generally any place where you pull the developers out of their often very product feature focused commitments to teach them a new thing.
Yeah, no, makes sense, makes sense. All right, so what are some of the, and again, we'll stick with you, Neil. What are some of the case studies or examples of success stories you've had when using AI as opposed to just like some of the generic things? So are there any particular things where you've been happy with?
Developer experience is one of the responsibilities of my organization. And the company I'm at right now is one of the first ones where the leaders were not engineers. So explaining the importance of developer efficiency, developer experience was an early challenge for me in this job. We survey our engineers and gather information on what they see as the priorities for that. Documentation consistently came up as one of the places that they struggle with as new engineers come in. Smart search, which is essentially just using a model to index all of the different collaboration tools we have, an amazing number, and provide AI-curated responses back to developers who are trying to solve a problem, has been phenomenal. And I think that building the knowledge graph of all of our distributed documentation has been such a good solution that I'm now finding customer success people, sales people, product people, all the other parts of the organization are coming in to use what I'm going to call an AI tool to solve their problems. It's been incredibly powerful to see that come together.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How about you? What's some of the successes you've seen?
I definitely share the same one there on documentation. I've found that we've always struggled with where the right documentation is, and someone doesn't find it, they create additional ones and things like that. I don't think that's ever not been a problem for our industry. And so I think AI has really helped identify, coalesce that, and even sometimes, and I love now how a lot of the AI agents will even show their work, like, hey, I got the document from over here, so here's their standard operating procedure. So that's been a pretty big win. The other one that I really like is getting from idea to prototype has never been faster before. That's been pretty amazing for our design and product teams, and even for engineering to be able to help contribute a little bit more. That I think being able to kind of vet that out and see what works and what doesn't. I mean, there's still a lot of work in that last mile. I think people often kind of underestimate that part. But how quickly you can really ideate and then see if that's going to work has helped us really kind of toss around a lot of different ideas and see what works and what doesn't a little faster before we go all in commit on it.
Makes sense. All right. So see if we can squeeze in 2 more questions. So the next one is, what do you think we need to be cautious or aware of as AI becomes more integrated into observability? Maybe Neil, we'll start with you.
Specifically within observability. Okay, interesting. I do think back to what Jeremy touched on, you still have to look at the code that it's generating. And I shared the same fears, the Replit story around I deleted your code base and I lied to you about it. But I worry about that sort of thing. Within observability, I don't know. I haven't really discovered the limits of the tools yet. But I think if we forget the essentials of troubleshooting as a skill set, totally relying on the agent, we'll lose that element of creativity that humans who understand complex systems that are not necessarily documented in a way AI can discover, bring to triage today.
Yeah, yeah. Anything on your side?
Yeah, I think the overdependence there, I think that's a worry just across the board for AI. I do worry that if you don't have some expertise in an area and that you might be overtly trusting AI can be a little dangerous. But it's also, it's not any different than humans. We have human error as well. Not every human that says something is right. I think we often forget that. So even with alerting and things like that, like my first thing that comes to mind is false positives, but then I think back to how many thresholds were set too low or too high by humans as well, that I think it doesn't really change, right? Like I think it comes down to we still can't be overly trusting. This isn't this isn't always going to give you the right answer, just like a human is not always going to give you the right answer. So if you treat it as such, then I think you'll be well prepared for any of the concerns that come up.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Like, big thing for me whenever I'm looking at something like this is like trust but verify.
Yes.
Exactly. Make sure that it hasn't hallucinated something weird or done something crazy. And just as you would test code that someone gave you and had completed, like that's still got to run through your CI/CD pipeline or whatever else it might be. Make sure that it's running as expected. Yeah, makes sense. All right, so we've got a little over about 5 minutes left, and there's kind of one big question I'd like to kind of hear from you both on, which is if you had one recommendation for the audience here, the folks here, based on your experiences, for people embarking on the journey of AI in observability, like what would be that recommendation? Maybe Neil, we'll start with you.
Start in an area where you can relatively quickly determine if you are having a positive impact as you experiment. What you don't want to do is end up tied up in a 6-month tools evaluation for 2 or 3 different tools where you get to the end and legal or finance says we can't afford this one or you can't buy this one because reasons. Every place we've tried to do a very big, complex migration over the course of my career, it has taken significantly longer than expected. Nothing will be different with AI tool adoption. But places where you can go in, get value quickly, I go back to both the AI assistant and my own use of it to quickly solve problems with broken dashboards and surface information. That was fantastic. And it took me 15 minutes or less to evaluate and solve a problem there. And then the documentation, Smart Search as well. That was pretty easy to bring in, and we started to see that value quickly. In contrast, proving that we can rewrite the entire code base using Cursor or one of the other tools in an agentic fashion, I just don't think we're going to be able to evaluate the feasibility of that in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, I did see something highly amusing where someone had actually gone through and asked a code tool to rewrite the entire code base, and they said, "Oh, this code, it's so beautiful, it's amazingly commented. Like none of it works, but it looks so nice, it looks so pretty." Yeah, that's a real challenge. How about you, Jeremy? What's the one bit of advice for the folks here?
I would say organize your data. I think context in data now is going to become way, way, way more important when you can run analysis over it the way you can with AI. But at the end of the day, it does well with patterns. So if your data is disorganized, your results are likely not going to be as well organized. So I think good taxonomy in terms of one of the things we've tried to do with our data, at least in observability, is make sure that we've segmented products properly where everything's all together, or what runtime it's running in, or what team it's associated with, so that you can narrow the context, which helps get you better results because you're scanning less tokens when you're processing it. But then also, those are things you can train the AI a little bit better on here's how the data already is structured and organized. So it's far more efficient than wasting the first portion of its time trying to figure out and deduce through the data.
Yeah. I mean, I think we saw both yesterday in the keynote and in some of the other sessions, the more context you can give, it's
more structured context.
Yeah,
Yes.
but the AI is like a human in a lot of cases, in that if you don't give a human any context, it's go do task X, will it do what you wanted? Maybe, maybe not. Flip a coin, I don't know. But the more context that you give it, the more likelihood it's going to achieve the kind of goals that you're looking for. I couldn't agree more. We're still very much in this world of garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
It's not. We haven't fundamentally changed that. From my perspective, just for what it's worth, there's an Australian woodworker who I follow, Dane LeMade, on YouTube, who just says, just get started. Just need to pick something. I like the way you said, something that you think you can turn around relatively quickly, or you can realize whether you're having success or making progress really quickly. But pick something relatively easy to start with. Build the muscle memory, build the awareness and the sort of familiarity with the tooling, gain the experience, share the experience across teams, and build upon that. Make it less scary for everybody. All right. So I think we've got time for maybe one more question. And let's see. Okay, so maybe I'll just try and simplify this a little bit. AI tooling, build versus buy. When's the balance there between DIYing this stuff versus seeing if just taking something off the shelf? Maybe Jeremy.
Building AI tools. Anyone right now that wants to jump into that arena seems a bit. It's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to be. It seems like there's a lot of people right now trying to fight in that space. Fight's not necessarily the greatest term there, but compete in that space.
Yeah.
And it's really saturated. The good news is the progress that's being made is impressive. So it's hard to believe that one more could add that much better. I'm here to wait it out and buy, because at this rate, I don't know how anyone else could start and try to keep up and build as quickly as everything's moving right now.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Anything to add on your side?
Core versus context is always so important for a company. Do the things that are core to your business and really differentiating for its success. If there are other people that are solving problems that are context for your business in a way that meets your needs, leverage what they're doing. It will be their focus. Just the general conversation around observability. How many engineers work at Grafana on observability? How many engineers work at your company on observability? Draw on the expertise of the people who are solving a larger problem, and then figure out how to adapt it for your own needs.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all the time we have, unfortunately, but please give a massive round of applause to Neil and Jeremy here.